Seeing all the happy faces, I think we're live. And Brenna, thank you for joining us. We're going to have a few people still popping on here, but it is great to see you all today. Um, as you listen to my guest, be thinking about a question you might want to ask her. And the question you might have is, what is one big question you have about how to do a book launch well? I was at breakfast with a literary agent colleague of mine, and we were talking this week just how many book publishers do not do a book launch well. So that's probably not good news for all of you still looking for book deals. But Brenna, it's really awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining us today. And you're a strategist, a copywriter, a pre-launch expert, and a wife and mom. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, and how you got into this crazy career of book launching.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see all of you. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. I know you're all very busy, so I really appreciate you coming. And I live in Northern California. I'm a mom of three. I have a 23-year-old, a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old. And have my husband. We've been married 28 years. So I was a stay-at-home mom, and I loved being a stay-at-home mom. That was my goal. When my husband and I got married, I had a little bit of a career, but that was always what I wanted to do. And then I started to approach 40, and I started to think like, what? This isn't where I imagined I'd be at 40, even being a mom. Like I just thought, gosh, I thought I'd have something extra. And it's kind of like a twist and turns of events, but I accidentally fell into the career that I have now. I always joke I did it out of vanity. I had a friend who was starting an esthetician business, and I wanted fake eyelashes, eyelash extensions. And so I told her, I'm like, hey, why don't I do your marketing and then you can give me eyelash extensions? And I had been doing a little bit of stuff, but I truly didn't know what I was doing. And from, I started to do this, and I started to do social media for her and some email marketing, and people started to ask her like, who's doing your marketing? And I thought, oh my gosh, this might be a really good idea for me to make. I was just trying to make like an extra few $100s a month, to, I always say $500 a month, so I could take my kids to school, have some flexibility, pay the electric bill, and get the occasional Botox, because now I was 40. So I started to advertise myself as a social media manager, and I got clients immediately, except I didn't know what I was doing. And I quickly decided I hated social
Hi.
media management, and I quickly transitioned over into copywriting, and that's how I kind of fell into the launch world that we're in. And so I help my clients with all types of launches, uh, primarily course and membership launches, but we have a mutual friend who I also helped on a book launch, and it's kind of how I fell into this fun and crazy career that I'm in online business.
Yes, yes. Tammy Gustafson, who had a book come out in January, seems like decades ago, Tammy. And
Yes.
yet it was this year introduced us. And book launches are discussed on and talked about with every publisher and marketing publicity folks, and it occurs with a lot of enthusiasm, and then it goes silent. Why is a book launch so important to a writer?
Yeah, well, I uh, I think of launches in terms of events. And there's no bigger event around your book than the launch of it happening. And with an event and with your book launch, it really combines everything that makes launches work, which is you have something new. Humans, we're curious. We want to see what you're up to. It gives you a chance to build buzz and momentum. I think about summertime right now, and I'm sure most of us have planned some sort of vacation. If you live in the US or, somewhere long, if you're not in Australia, right? Because then it's winter. But if you're in a place where it's summer right now, I think about like you probably started planning a few months ago that you were going to go on vacation. And you started to think about like where were you going to go? How were you going to get there? All of these things. And it starts to build up this momentum. And whether you realize it or not, when we anticipate something out in the future, it gives us this hit of dopamine. And that is where you can use the launch of your book to tap into the human psychology of us looking forward to something, that hit of dopamine. There's actually studies that say that we enjoy anticipating something just as much as we enjoy it actually happening. A vacation's a great example. I think about one of my favorite authors. I love like fiction. I call them like, the kind of romance books. One of my favorite authors, Annabelle Monaghan, just had a new book come out. And actually, I didn't even realize it was coming out. But in the past, I knew she had one. And I would be looking forward to it, thinking, when am I going to be able to read this? And the cool thing that you have to your advantage when it comes to a book launch is that you have something that not a lot of people have that they're trying to sell. And that is you have something that's not available. And whether you realize it or not, there is, as humans, and I was just reading a book that like, I already knew this, but it confirms, we actually want what we can't have. And so when you can start talking about your book and creating curiosity, people start to want something that isn't available right now, which actually pulls them to you without you having to even overly sell. The other thing too is when you can use the time before your launch to create open loops, create curiosity as humans. If it's something that I'm interested in, if you start to create some type of open loop, our brains scientifically, like it's called the information gap theory, we have to close that loop. So there's so many things that go into having a book launch that's successful, but really when you do it right, you have this power and this opportunity to create this buzz and momentum that pulls people towards you and they demand your book.
That's so interesting. I was on a call early this morning with a colleague and was talking about Angela Duckworth's next book. She's the author of Grit. And I have the copy, and it doesn't come out till September. But to prove your point, the moment I told him about it, he was, oh, I've got to go and order that book. Like there was this desire to have that. So that's very fascinating. You've worked with authors and you've probably seen authors doing their book releases. What concerns do you have about authors poorly executing a book release? I'm sure you've seen
Yeah,
some poor ones.
I think my biggest concern, like I said, I help a lot of people in like the coaching momenta. It doesn't matter like whether you're launching a book, you're launching a course, a membership, right? The thing about the thing that concerns me the most with people is that I want you to think about it like a plane. Like when a plane takes off, right? You start revving your engine and you start like getting that velocity to go. And when your book is out, it's just harder to create that velocity. So the thing that concerns me now, I also don't think it's doom and gloom. If you're someone who is a published author or have a book, coincidentally, one of my current clients slash students is someone who helps people who've already published book get more attention on their book. And
Mm.
I was at a conference last week and I got to hear James Clear talk. And James Clear, he talked about how he didn't become a number one national bestseller till 2 years after he published his
Yeah.
book. So I don't want to be like, oh gosh, if it's all doom and gloom if you don't have a good book launch. I don't want to leave you with that. However, you have velocity on your side if you can start talking about things early, start marketing early, you have that natural energy, buzz, and momentum. So that's what you really want to tap into before. I know as I haven't published a book, I've kind of written a book that's sitting on a Google Doc somewhere. And I know how much work it is. I think we think, oh, it's so much work. You want to get this book done. You want a great product. but you really want to be simultaneously starting to ask yourself, how am I going to get this book out into the world? Because one thing I understand from, I have a good friend who published a book, is that from my understanding, I'm not in this world entirely, is that like you are in charge of your destiny when it comes to getting your book out into the world. If I'm sure publishers do their best with their marketing and PR departments, but if you really want to make your book a hit, it's really getting it out there and thinking about, how am I going to market this myself?
So good. You have, I think I've seen a sheet that you have out there, Brenna, for pre-launch, book launch. What are two important rules or key things for an author to know about a book launch?
Yes.
Is there even a like a you mentioned the airplane? Is there a runway? There's a sense that you can do a launch prematurely and send information out too soon. Can you speak to that maybe?
Yeah. I mean, for the book launches that I've followed, there's part of me who's like, is there too soon when it comes to a book launch? People will ask me, like, in general, like, how long should a launch be? And there's a lot of things that go into thinking about it. But, even movies, if you look at movies and how they're actually released, they start talking about a movie 120 days. They start putting a trailer out before it's released in theaters, and there's a
Mm.
reason why, right? Because they know they need that time. I think about Jen Hatmaker. I spoke at Social Media Marketing World last year, and I used her as one of my examples when it comes to building anticipation, which is like, I was looking at her book. Like, she had a book coming out in February or March. I'm going off of memory here. And like, I was looking at a reel she was doing on Instagram in September about it, right? So I don't think that, I think you can be talking, my friend Laura Belgray, if my memory serves me correctly, she's an author, and she was talking about her publishing her book, I think even 2 years beforehand. So it's like, it's just starting to talk about it is a good thing, not to be like in your cave of writing your book and thinking about it in two steps. So if there's a couple of things that I think are super important to any launch, whether it's book launch or course membership, whatever you're doing, is first of all, really thinking about your audience. How are you building your audience right now? James Clear, once again, he's top of mind since I just heard him speak, is that I believe he was 18 months before he published his book, he was actually building his audience and getting things prepped and ready. So quite a lot of time. If you don't, anything we're selling, if we don't have an audience, it's going to be a lot harder to sell to.
Mm.
The second thing I'd say is really important is being early, especially in a book launch. My whole career at this point is teaching people how to talk about things before they're ready or out, and building momentum and anticipation, but especially with a book launch, thinking about how early it is. And I'm going to throw in a third thing that I think is especially important during book launches, is thinking about, and it's kind of two things smushed into one, which is building your network and calling in favors. And how can you ahead of time really think about, how can you be, you know, I think in reciprocity, like how can you be giving, but also how can you be thinking about, how can you ask friends, Tammy, who I helped with her book launch, is like trying to say, okay, you have this network of people, who can we go and ask to help you build up some of that momentum at the same time?
That's good. We do have some time for questions. I want to make this question and answer time available to you all. So, Kyle, I suspected you would have a question, and I can't imagine a world without questions from J.R. Briggs. So,
Yeah,
Kyle, go ahead with yours, and then J.R., I'll call on you next. Kyle?
awesome. Hey, thank you for this. This is awesome. First of all, it's kind of a two-part question. So, how do you how do you change your methodology once you get beyond your immediate circle? So, for example, I have podcast followers, a lot of followers, subscribers, but once you get beyond that initial group, how does the messaging change once you get outside of that circle of influence?
Are you asking how the messaging changes or how you build your audience, Kyle?
Well, I've already built the audience. So my question is, for example, you obviously want the launch to go as big as possible. So say I have 100,000, followers across all my platforms. Once I get outside of that sphere of influence, do you alter the messaging? And if so, how does it change to hook people that have never
Yeah, I
heard of
think
you? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a great question. Can I ask you what your book is on, what you talk about?
Yeah. So it's fiction, Southern noir, pretty violent, pretty grotesque. So
A
yeah.
page turner.
So,
Oh, well, thank you, Doc.
yes. Okay, so if you're trying to go beyond that, the people, I think my question would be, are there, I don't know if your messaging needs to change if you're tapping into the right audience per se. So, meaning, are you going after an audience that is looking for that page turner, a little bit fiction, a little bit of violence so they know right up front that's what they're going to be getting?
Sure, because it feels like you're like say that 100,000 number, like that the messaging is like, hey, you already know me. And then after that, it's like, hey, you've never heard of me. And maybe maybe you read, maybe you don't. So I'm sure it kind of flips the script a little bit.
Yeah, and I think too, you're probably, if we're thinking about like ideal clients, we're probably not tapping into the person who's not reading. We're probably trying to tap into the person who is someone who's out there reading books in a similar genre and thinking about like how can you position yourself as the book that they want to read next.
Yeah, that's good. I know in pitching Kyle's project, we've said if you like Riley Sager or some of these, so outside of people who don't know him and his craft, it's okay. You already know Stephen King and recognizable names. If you like him, you'd like Kyle, kind of thing.
Yeah,
JR,
I
go
love
ahead.
the pull, pulling an association. I think is super smart.
Hi, Brenna. Thanks for what you're doing and really gleaning a lot here. The question is this: is it better to have one large blowout book launch event the week your book releases, or to create a series of a lot of smaller events or initiatives over a period of several months? And if so, what's the ideal? Is it a couple weeks, a couple months? Is it 2 years, like you mentioned with James Clear? What do you recommend in that?
Yeah. Can I say both? Like I think you can't promote your book enough. I think I think it depends on what your goal is. Is it pre-orders or is it getting is it actually selling on that first day? So, for you, Jared, right now, what is your priority?
Brett, my priority is a book came out in October, and I'm trying to keep the burn going after it's been out. And there has been a lot of good burn that's been created, which is great. But I'm also thinking about another book project coming up, so I'm kind of in between right now on the back end of one and thinking about another, which is why I ask.
Yeah. So I would go check out my friend and student Carlin Akram, because she really helps people who've already launched
Okay.
books. I know we're talking about both, but she's someone who has helps people who've already launched books, and she would be a great resource for you about the book that you already have. I think if you can start to create, if your goal is pre-orders, then I would say, okay, how can we start creating these little events? But I would definitely still be having some big lead up as to on, publishing day that you're having some big launch event. When I helped Tammy in January, we were not as concerned with pre-orders. We were really concerned on how can we get as many people to order that book and create momentum the day it was published.
Okay.
So I would say yes. In terms of when does your book come out next?
Well, I don't have we don't have anything set yet for the next
Okay.
one, but the one that came out in October. So just kind of thinking ahead a little bit on that one. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I another person to follow too is my friend Laura Belgray. She has a program called Book Launch Hero that I really love, and she's really great about the timeline. I'm going to say in general that I would be thinking at least, 6 months is where you're starting to talk about it, and kind of like using that time to like slowly, 6 months ahead, I'd be like doing some like behind the scenes content and what's coming up, asking for people for opinions. Do you, even if you already know, like, do you like this cover? Do you like this cover? Do you prefer this? Do you prefer this title? Which one of these? You start pulling your audience into the creation process with you. So whenever you have an opportunity, even if it's well before 6 months, as Don said, Tammy's book launched, I think it was something like January 27th, and it seems like 6 months ago, right? Like time goes by so quick. So doing things earlier and talking about your book earlier is never going to hurt you. Oh, I see Tammy now.
And Brenna, one thing I say to people, to authors, constantly is that for a publisher, you're one of 12 in that season or one in 20 in that season. But for you, the author, it's just you. You have one book. And while your street date is important, you have 18 months, 24 months, years to keep promoting it. Whereas the publisher sees your book, has a happy dance on the day it streets, but then they go on to, you know, whoever the next person, Jodi Bacolt's book is next, or whoever's on their list. So you kind of lose the, you know, they have a lot of runways they're taking off on, whereas you just have one kind of thing. Can you remind us the name of the person you referenced? Carlin Akram? Drew Tilton.
Akram. Yes, A-N-K. Oh, let me make sure I spell her name right. Give me just a second.
And,
I think it's Ankron.
and
Let's see.
Kathy from Florida, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, so I had a book published, it'll be 3 years ago, last August. And before it was published, I had formed about, I don't know, I think maybe 30 people, friends of mine. And then I also subscribed or hired, I can't even remember now how it worked, other people, not hired, but like joined a group that would help me to launch my book. So I kind of like formed a troupe, right, of people who would help get the word out. I felt sort of like everything happened so fast once it was coming, that I wish I had started earlier. But can you speak into that? Like, what's the best way, or is that a good idea, right? To sort of have this team of people that will help you, people who read your genre, people who are, part of book clubs or whatever. What's the best way in your mind to utilize that? And I mean, it did seem to help me, but yeah, I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yes. I have three things when it comes to that, which is ask, make it easy, remind the heck out of them. So it's, and let me go back to number one, ask and ask early, right? As busy business owners, friends, people who have an audience, they're usually going to have a lot of things on, like my promotional calendar is booked out months in advance right now. And so going and making sure that you're asking early. And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. And this is why we want to be building up our network and getting people out there, because there's no better reference, as you all know, than creating that word of mouth marketing. If I have a friend who recommends, I do it all the time with my friends, right? Like, oh, what book are you reading? Oh, she likes that book, I'm going to order it. I'm not even like thinking twice about it. So the more that you can kind of create that, like, I love, and this goes back to all marketing that I help people with. I love the forward face marketing, but the undercurrent of marketing. So I think what you're talking about, Kathy, you really want to tap into that undercurrent of what people are saying, what other others are saying and referencing. So I think it's an absolutely great idea to have that team. I think is how can you make it as easy as possible for them to promote? How can you create with AI now, which is great, creating swipe copy for social, for emails that they can easily send out. How can maybe they'll announce it on a podcast? Like the easier it is for me to promote someone else, the more I'm going to do it. And then not to be shy in reminding people, hey, in 3 days, this is this. Asking people for a commitment. And this has been an area where I've been a little touched. Sometimes I feel weird about it. So I just want to like preface it where I'm like, okay, Kathy, you said that you were going to promote XYZ book. Thank you so much. Can you please tell me what specific days that we can check up on this, or what specific days that you are going to promote and how you're going to promote, just so we can be cheering alongside of you. Like, how can you really make it feel like a team effort so that it doesn't slip through the cracks in our busy lives?
That's good. Thank you so much. I would say this too, though. People that I thought for sure would help me with this, some of those didn't. And then people that I didn't expect really to come through for me did. So you just never know, I think throw the net
I've
wide, you know.
I've heard this before, and that was something that my friend Laura Belgray, hopefully, she wrote the book Tough Titties, which is a hilarious book. You should read it. And she's the one that does Book Launch Hero. But I remember her talking about saying that she like wish she would have asked more people. At least I think that's what she said. So like when you are going out and asking, when Tammy and I were talking, I feel like there's so much going on. Like, did I really do this, or I'm just imagining this? But like, we're like, okay, how could we get many people? Like getting more people on your team than you think that you need, because of that exact reason that Kathy said, is that sometimes the people that you think are for sure going to help you don't, unfortunately. And then you have other people come through for you. So ask a lot of people.
That's a really good insight, Brenna. Two questions that I'm seeing here on the chat. One is about an audiobook coming a year after the book launch. Any thoughts on book launch marketing for an audiobook specifically, but then a year later?
Yeah, I would start treating it like I was relaunching all over again, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend once say, like, you can create momentum anytime that you want, and it's always stuck with me. Like, you can choose to create momentum. So think of the audio event as an entire new event, meaning you can be giving behind the scenes little clips. You could be talking about showing you actually recording if you haven't yet, talking about what that experience was like, talking about there's people like me who depending on what type of book it is, like I love a good audiobook. You have a whole bunch of people that you're going to tap into that may not ever crack open a real book, or get it on their Kindle, but they'll listen to you on their walks, talk about that. So I absolutely would be creating a campaign around the release of the audio.
Yeah, that's good. I even when a book goes from hardcover to paperback, to consider it a new event, right? And just introduce, assuming people who bought the hardcover, you have a whole new audience with the paperback. So good reason to talk it up again.
Yeah, and you could be giving, like, if you're able to. I'm always like, how can we get, like, my number one goal to all my clients is how can we get them onto our email list? How can we grow them? So like, can you give the first chapter away? Could you do a podcast tour where you're actually going out and talking about the book, but that at the end of it, you could give it away, and then you're getting a bunch of warm leads. If you can get people to listen to that first chapter, the chances that they'll listen to the rest are going to be much, much higher. So I would also be thinking about it, not only just in like, okay, how can we build buzz, but how can I start securing and creating an even bigger audience that I can go back and retarget once that actual audiobook comes out?
We have a question from a new author. Well, he's been a writer for a while, but asking how would you guide a new author to better understand what they need to wrap their minds around in terms of marketing their book or launching their book? I think that's a good question because so many writers know the craft of writing, but they don't have a MBA or a marketing degree. Can you speak to that,
Yes.
Brenna?
Uh, Well, the good news is I don't have a marketing degree either. Like I said, I was a stay-at-home mom. So like you are in the age of information where I think if you are a couple of resources, once again, I go back to, there's people out there that actually have programs like Laura Belgray, I took her book launch hero. That was super helpful to me because I am not, I spend a lot of my time in course launches, not book launches. So the other thing too is that you can use AI right now to help guide you. So I would say, tap into the age of AI if you're like, okay, where do I even start? I think the most important thing is thinking about your calendar. Okay, I have this calendar. How far advance am I going to start promoting my book? Okay, how am I promoting my book? Like, what are the channels of marketing? Am I sending emails? Am I building up social? Am I looking at going on podcasts? Okay, now that I know how I'm going to do it, now I need to think about the content that goes into each part of those. So I think if you start off broad, but like sitting, actually, I'm, Gen X, so I always joke around. Like I have like my old school calendar, like sitting in front of a calendar and at least like thinking about when I'm going to be promoting, how I'm going to be promoting, on what channels, and then going after whether it's, taking a different, a program or you're using AI, you start looking at the different ways of like, how can I use these channels to get the messaging out that I want to? So that's where I would start.
Drew Tilton, I think I saw a question. My screen's gone wonky. Go ahead with a question, Drew. I think you had one.
Yeah, it was pretty similar actually, but maybe it could just take a slightly different angle. Where do you start from scratch when you're trying to build like an email list and a following, when you're just like fresh out, you're not great at social media, you're trying to um, build something from nowhere. How do you start getting your name out there in the first place?
Yes. So what channels do you like, Drew?
Uh, these ones. So, I mean, I'm pretty unique in that way, but like probably Substack is the closest to me, and I think it's probably a good place to start. But I was curious, because I think it also zaps straight into people's email, which is a huge advantage. They don't have to go looking. But it's just it's intimidating to think like, okay, I'm just going to put this thing out here. How do I get people to find that channel? Start building that following over time, because I'm looking for something that's, for this particular project, it's going to be pretty far out. So I'm hoping to start now for something that I could be potentially launching 2 or 3 years from now. So I'm just curious about your thoughts, just wanted to get a feel for what you thought on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I am not a Substack person, so speaking to that, however, I think that it's for, as you described, a good platform in terms of thinking like, okay, I can go in, I can write, I can get people, you can get to the email list. So I think it's just, yeah, it sounds so not fun and exciting, but I think it's starting. How can you start putting content out there, and how can you be supporting others around you that will also, because I think it's twofold. I just created like a mini course that I'm starting to sell called creative collaborations and or creative collabs, and in that course I talk about there's three things that I think when it comes to growing your email list, unless you're like running ads or something like that. But when we think about, thinking about collaboration, other people, is first of all, you have to be super niche. And, like, which I'm sure you are, Drew, but this just goes for everyone. Like, how clear is it of what type of author are you? For example, I follow this person and online, I just found her on Instagram. She's a romance author, but she's not just a romance author. She's a romance author that with no spice or no smut. I forget how she describes herself exactly, but I was like, oh, that's what I want, right? Like I want more books that where I can just read sweet romance books is how she describes it. So she's so super clear at the type of author that she is. And so keeping that in mind. The second thing is like thinking about the type of content that you're putting out. Like for you, like going and starting to write about your experience, about what could be in the book, about your life. It doesn't even have to be completely about the book, but getting people to feel like they know you and want to stay connected to you if you're going to use Substack. And the third thing that I talk about is being a good human. And I think we all are good humans, but really thinking about like, okay, how am I supporting others? How can I make friends? Like the reason, I think part of the reason that I went from a 40-year-old stay-at-home mom with, no social following, no business experience, or at least my own business experience, and, no 4-year degree to where I'm at now is because I just started to connect with people and support others. So that would be like the three-pronged approach that I would take in terms of it will really supporting others. And if they support you and then they come and they check you out, that will accelerate your growth.
Hey, hit me with those three prongs again, just one more time, because I was jotting
Yeah,
down a
yeah.
ton of notes about what you were saying. What were the three main
So you want to be so, I say super niche, which is like so extremely clear as to what type of author you are. I mean, especially for you authors, you have such an advantage, I feel like, because once I know that you're a book writer and that you write in the exact genre of the type of books that I like, I'm automatically going to be connected to you and want to follow you. Secondly, it's putting out really great content, which is, I know that's a broad term, but, putting out good content on a regular basis, which taps people into not just who you are in terms of a writer, but like who you are personally, kind of starting to create those connections and also starting to give those sneak peeks into your book is what I would be doing. And then the third prong is the, being a good human prong, which is how can I support others, comment others, cheer others on, start talking to other people about how we can collaborate. The more of that you do, the more it will accelerate that content that you're putting out there.
That's good. I'm going to ask Stephanie in Austin to jump in here and give a little testimonial of your Substack experience, Stephanie.
Well, I think you make a good point, Brenna, about writing good content, but it really is too broad. I think that for me, my Substack grew from 600 to 4,500 followers in a period of 2 years, 2.5 years maybe, because I took risks with the content that I put out. Write some risky content. I heard a woman writer say in a workshop once, she said, write in a way that scares you a little bit. So I'm kind of out there on Substack. People know that what I like are the depths. I want to mine the depths. And the part about offering encouragement brings in a lot. People come to Substack to read. Other social media, I had 7,500 followers on Substack, and I'm sure people just went by and did little heart emojis. I don't think anybody read a word that I said.
Instagram.
Instagram, I'm sorry. But Substack, people come to read and write there. And so you meet other writers, and other writers in that Substack circle can be a huge boon. It's a very supportive, encouraging network. There's a guy on our call today, Bronze Rice, and I met on Substack because we engaged in a certain way on a certain Substack that wasn't even his, wasn't even mine. And we now have crossover. People that go to his Substack come to mine. People that come to my Substack go to his. And it all has to do with an ongoing conversation. And especially for people that are like, they're big on readers, they're big on books. you want people that are going to actually read. And I just don't find that on any other place in social media, except for maybe Medium. But I've had a great experience with Substack. I love the audience there.
Thanks, Stephanie. And she's a good human too. So
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I love what Stephanie is saying, right? And I think something that I always remind my clients and students of, and in that same vein of what Stephanie said, is like you can be contrarian without being confrontational. So I know sometimes I hear like be risky, and I'm like, oh, I don't like to be risky, right? But you can have certain points of view that doesn't have to necessarily be confrontational, but can be contrarian. And when you can tap into that, you're really going to tap into the people who love you. I talk a lot about the common enemy, like who is your common enemy in terms of what you do, and how can you tap into that as well. Oh, Stephanie, you're on mute.
unmute.
Sometimes I think it's just a matter of how much truth you're willing to tell about yourself. It's not a matter of creating controversy. It's just a matter of how true, we hear the word authentic a lot, and I put it in air quotes because it's almost become like something that doesn't mean much, but it is about authenticity. How much are you willing to risk to be authentic and tell the truth about who you are and how you see the world? There doesn't have to be any kind of confrontational thing to make it, one of my biggest posts was something called "What Can One Old Woman Do?" And I wrote it the day after the election last year. And that thing got so much traction, and that drove business. I write a lot about age, but I write about the word old as I embrace the word old. And people go, whoa, how do you do that? So tell the truth about who you are, embrace who you are, and show people that you're not afraid to mine the depths. And that has nothing to do with controversy. That just has to do with how authentic you're willing to be. Just to add on.
Yeah, I love everything that you're saying, Stephanie.
That's awesome. Brenna, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to reach you or discover what other offerings you have, tell us where we can find you on Insta or Facebook or in Savage or Rescue, California.
Yes. If you're ever in Rescue, California, come say hi. It's a tiny little town. But I'm mostly on Instagram at Brenna McGowan Co. I also have a Facebook group called Behind the Launch. And if you come over there, that's another great place where we talk all things marketing, copywriting, and launching. So thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, Brenna. Uh, and thank you to all for joining today. Next month, July, we're going to have a fun, very much interactive one with Nancy Rue joining us. And it's going to be for all scribblers. Please join me in July. We'll be doing breakout rooms for that. And then in August, we have Charlotte Donlin joining us to talk about spiritual direction for writers. And that will be very insightful. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining and giving a little bit of your time. See ya.
Thanks.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.